Hello, we are live now.
Okay, hi, good evening.
Good evening. So, I'm just waiting for some people to join. Let me put it on my status so that people will know.
Okay.
So, okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever and wherever you're watching this video. So my name is Ifeoluwa Bamurewa Akinfe. In today's video, we'll be discussing on a very important topic. We all know that where there is no law, there's no sin. So our topic today is um real estate law, property law, and compliance. So, welcome to another episode of Entrepreneur Move. If you are just joining in, just drop your favorite emoji, drop your location, your favorite emoji where you're watching from. So, with me here is Absalam Zainab, Zainab Absalam, Esquire, my humble barrister. So when she start talking now, you know that when she starts speaking, you know that she's proficient with her words. And if you are joining in, please drop your favorite emoji, drop your location, comments, drop your comments on the comment section, please. And let's put the link on our status, Instagram, stories, and our social media so that we're going to notify anyone that are interested in this topic. So, Ms. Zainab,
Hi, good evening.
evening. Thank you for joining us here on the show tonight.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure
Uh,
to be here. And thank
All
you for
right,
the opportunity. To...
ma'am.
I said thank you for the opportunity.
All right, ma. So you can have the floor, ma.
All right, thank you very much. I welcome you all to today's session. As she has rightly said, I'm Zainab Abdusalam, and today I'll be taking us through real estate law, property rights, and compliance. So, basically, right, as we all know that in Nigeria now, property remains one of the most sought after forms of investment. But then behind every successful real estate transaction lies a clear understanding of the legal structure that governs land ownership, transfers, and compliance. So, unfortunately, many real estate investors fall into the avoidable pitfalls ranging from fraudulent sales to unperfected titles simply because legal due diligence was overlooked and was not conducted. So today I will enlighten us on the fundamentals of land ownership under the Nigerian law, the statutory and constitutional framework regulating real estate transactions, as well as the compliance obligations that need to be observed while purchasing a property in Nigeria. So firstly, we need to understand the concept of land ownership in Nigeria. Real estate investment in Nigeria is governed by the Land Use Act of 1978. And this Land Use Act vests all land ownership in the state government. This means that individuals and businesses or anybody can actually acquire land through leases, which is typically for 99 years. So after dis 99 years, the land rights revert to the state unless a renewal is obtained. So I want you to take note of the following. Number one, land is controlled by the government, but then ownership is granted through what? A certificate of occupancy, which is popularly known as the C of O. So dis C of O is issued by the Nigerian state government, and dis document evidences a holder's statutory right of occupancy in land, which is what? For 99 years. So there is no absolute ownership of land in Nigeria. What you get is what? Certificate of occupancy, which what? Evidences what? Your holder's statutory right of occupancy, and is what? For it lasts for 99 years and can be renewed after dat 99 years. So you see dis C of O, it's a crucial land document that must be obtained or transferred for lawful property ownership rights in Nigeria. Secondly, it is essential to verify land titles before purchase to avoid disputes and fraudulent sales. So if you want to get any property, land, you need to what? Verify the land title. Don't just be in a haste to purchase a property or land. So I will now take us through the legal framework of property rights in Nigeria. Like I had said earlier, we have the Land Use Act of 1978. This act is a foundational statute for land tenure in Nigeria. It vests all lands in the governor of each state. So the key provisions include the requirement of the governor's consent for any alienation, transfer, lease or mortgage of a right of occupancy, and the governor's power to revoke rights for overriding public purposes. So basically what I'm saying here is that the Land Use Act vests ownership of land in the government of each state. So before you can say that you want to transfer ownership of a land to another person, you need what? You need the governor's consent, right? In order for you to what? To transfer your property or land to another person. So the Land Use Act provides for all these key provisions. The Land Use Act also provides for instances where the governor can actually has the power to revoke rights for overriding public purposes. You see sometimes whereby you hear that, oh, the government have taken over that land. It is enshrined in the Land Use Act that what the governor has the right to revoke this right of occupancy for overriding public purposes. Maybe they want to construct the roads and the likes. They have the right to do that. But then this right is not absolute, in the sense that if your statutory right of occupancy is actually being revoked, you are entitled to what is called compensation. So the government cannot just do it abruptly, like just do it on their own, right? So you have the right to what? To request for what? Compensation. So there are a lot of matters in court regarding this. Another another law guiding real estate property transactions in Nigeria is Constitution. The 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It guarantees Nigerians the right to acquire and own immovable property anywhere in the country. And it also provides that federal or state authorities must follow due process and pay compensation if they compulsorily acquire property, which I have actually said earlier. So we also have the state land laws and regional legislation. So many states still use adapted versions of older laws for property transactions. For example, now in the southern states that were part of the old western region, they use was the Property and Conveyancing Law of 1959. It applies to them, whereas the former eastern and northern region states recognize the Conveyancing Act of 1881. So another law we have the Tenancy and Lease laws as well. So in essence, I don't want to bore you with laws and everything, because I believe that some of us here are not lawyers. But then you need to take note of what this statutory framework for you to understand the concept of real estate in Nigeria. So in essence, this legal framework for property rights in Nigeria is actually multi-layered. The Land Use Act and the Constitution, like I've said earlier, are paramount, and they establish the grounds for ownership and state control. State laws and regulations actually has details on how transactions are executed and how land can be used. So I'll be moving on to the land registration process now. So this is one critical aspect of property rights in Nigeria, that is registration. So the official recording of land titles or deeds in Nigeria is based on these registration processes. So in Nigeria, for instance, land registration serves to publicize interest in land and protect purchasers by establishing priority of claims. So this land registration is for when you secure any land or property, that title has to be registered. And the reason why you are doing this is to protect your own interest from the public, and to also protect the purchaser who does not know of any prior interest or title over that land. However, not all states use the exact same system, right? But then there are two main systems of land registration in Nigeria. So number one, we have the registration of instruments, that is the deed registration. So under this system, any instrument, whether a deed of assignment, mortgage, lease affecting land, must be registered at the state land registry. So what does registration does? Registration gives the instrument priority over any earlier unregistered interest. Let me give you an instance. Let's say Mr. A bought a land in 2005, but then he didn't register it because he wasn't aware of the fact that he needs to register his title. He needs to register this maybe his deed of assignment or whatever transactions that occurred. So he bought the land in 2005. He didn't register it at the land registry. Then Mr. B bought this same land in 2010, right? But then went to the land registry to register it. This registration gives this instrument priority over any earlier unregistered interest. So the Mr. B in this instance has what has a proper title compared to Mr. A, who failed to register what his instrument, that is maybe his deed of assignment. So basically what I'm saying here is that always register property transactions promptly as required by law. If you don't do this, it means that you have slept on your rights. Equity aids the vigilant, not the indolent. Meaning that whenever you buy a land, a property or anything, whatever instrument or contract that is being executed, you need to what? Register it at the land registry. So secondly, we have registration of titles. This is like a more modern system implemented in some areas like Lagos and the Federal Capital Territory Abuja. So under a title registration system, the focus is on registering the title, that is the ownership itself, rather than the individual instruments. So once you are registered as the owner of a piece of land, that registration is evidence of your title, and anyone later acquiring an interest must register a change. So under the title registration, a purchaser who registers their title can gain priority over earlier unregistered claims. So I also there are another means of another land registration process. We have the registration of company charges too. So basically it is relevant that if you are dealing with real estate owned by a corporate entity, you need to register the mortgage on that property with the Corporate Affairs Commission. This is to in order for it to be effective against third parties. So this system is just to ensure that creditors can check for prior charges when lending to companies. So this one applies to the companies. So now for an individual involved in real estate transaction, typically a sale or purchase agreement, the parties will execute what is called a deed of assignment. What is a deed of assignment? The deed of assignment is a legal document that transfers title from the seller to the buyer. So in order to perfect this transaction, you need to secure your legal title. In order to secure your legal title, there are three key steps. We call it CSR, that is consent stamping and registration. Please, are you following me? Hope I'm not too fast.
No, no, no. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, yeah. So in order to perfect your transaction, so the transaction doesn't stop at you executing a deed of assignment which transfers title, right? So you also move ahead to what? To perfect this transaction, which is known as the CSR procedure. The C means consent, the S means stamping, and the R means registration. So firstly, obtaining governor's consent. This is contained in the Land Use Act which I mentioned earlier. So the holder of a statutory right of occupancy, right, must seek the consent of governor before transferring that right to the buyer. So you can't just say dat because you have a C of you have a C of or something, you have a statutory right of occupancy over a particular land, you can just transfer like that. No, you can't just transfer like that. You need the what? The consent of the governor before you transfer that property to the buyer. So in practice, in application with the details of the parties and the property and payment of the consent fee, right, you most times you submit this fee to the state lands bureau. So without the governors consent, any purported transfer is legally void. That is, it means that there was no transfer at all. The deed of assignment is meaningless if you don't what? Perfect your title. And another step is the payment of the stamp duties. So you see this deed of assignment, right? After you've already sought the governor's consent, the next thing is to what? Is to stamp this deed of assignment. The deed must be stamped by the tax authorities, right? So it just depends on the instrument. Like I said, and also stamping essentially, when you stamp on time, it ensures that the government gets the due taxes from that transaction. But basically, you need to what? Secure governors consent, and you also need to stamp the deed of assignment. Then thirdly, we have the registration at the land registry. So finally, the signed and stamped deed of assignment alongside with the evidence of governors consent is registered at what? At the state land registry where the property is located. Do you understand? So you need to what? Perfect your title after you have executed a deed of assignment. So I would just like to say that the entire process of perfection of title, that is consent stamping registration, can actually be time consuming, but it's not unusual for it to take several months or more, especially in busy place like Lagos, and sometimes it can be costly as well. But then despite these inconveniences, these steps are vital, they are crucial. That was secure legal ownership. And if you skip any of all these steps, it can leave the buyer with an imperfect title, and that might not withstand legal scrutiny or challenge in the long run. So it's also worth mentioning that there is no central national land registry in Nigeria. We don't have a national land registry. Each state has their own. They have their own registries. Some states are digitizing their land registries. For example, Abuja now, they have an advanced digital registry under the Abuja Geographic Information System, which is known as the AGIS. And Lagos now, they also have the electronic C of O issuance. So, and all this is just to improve efficiency and reduce fraud. So now the onus is on the parties to diligently perfect and verify title through what? The official processes. So now I'll also be giving us a practical tip. So before you purchase a land, before you purchase a property, always conduct a title search at the land registry to ensure that the current registered owner, and to ensure that there is no any current registered owner on that property, and also to check for any encumbrances like mortgages or court caveats. So this search is actually critical part of due diligence and can reveal if the land has any pending issues or if the seller truly has a good title. So when you want to buy a land or anything, you always make sure that what? You go to the land registry to confirm the current registered owner and check for any encumbrances over the properties, because some properties might have been mortgaged which you don't know, and then they will sell it to you and you pay the money, then later some people come and meet you that, oh, this property was actually mortgaged and all those things, was just to secure a loan. Or there might also be any pending court dispute or anything on that particular property. That is why you need to do what? Due diligence. So now I'll be taking us to the next part, which is what? Essential legal documents for real estate transactions. So there are some key legal documents that is required in order for you to obtain the proper documentation when you are purchasing a property. So the legal documents include: number one, we have the certificate of occupancy. This certificate of occupancy is proof of government approval for land use. It's usually issued by the government. I've already to explain this earlier. Number two, we have the deed of assignment. A legal agreement, which is what? A legal agreement transferring ownership rights, is called a deed of assignment. So you need to have a C of O, you need to have a deed of assignment. And thirdly, you also need a survey plan. And the survey plan confirms the land's location and size. And this is usually done by what? By a surveyor. Another legal document that I need is the governor's consent, that is required for legal transfer of ownership. You should note that failure to obtain all these documents, these four key documents that I've highlighted above, can lead to disputes and po ten tial loss of investment for an investor who is into real estate, or a buyer who wants to purchase a property or a land. You need to know that if you don't have all these documents, it can actually lead to dispute later in the future. So that's to avoid all this, your legal documents has to be intact. Yes, so I'll also take us through compliance obligations in real estate transactions. So engaging in real estate transaction in Nigeria, whether you are buying, whether you are selling, whether you are leasing or developing, comes with several compliance obligations. So and if you fail to adhere to this, it can lead to invalid transactions, right? So there are some certain compliance obligations buyers, sellers and property developers need to keep in mind in order to stay on the right side of the law. So for buyers now, if you are purchasing a property, you should actually the first key thing that you have to do is to engage a lawyer. So don't say that because you don't have the money, those lawyers they will extort you, this and this. No, because at the end of the day, if you don't engage a lawyer in whatever transactions they are dealing with, you are just going to see that maybe later in the future, so people will start laying claim over that property. There might be potential dispute in that property. So if you engage a real estate lawyer in Nigeria, that lawyer will conduct what is called due diligence. Lawyer will help you to draft, review your documents and ensure that all legal requirements are being met. That is the first thing. Secondly, you need to do what? A title search and verification. So you need to what? Conduct a search, like I said earlier, at the relevant land registry to confirm the seller's title. And this is to ensure that there are no mortgage lien, pending litigation or a prior sale of that property. You also need to investigate the root of title, request for copies of existing C of O or deed, ensure that there are no outstanding governor's consent or other approvals missing from previous transfers. And this step is actually like you doing a background check on the property's legal status. Another thing you need to take note of is a physical inspection and local inquiry. So don't just say that just contact somebody, yes I need this property and you just transfer the money. No, go, you can send someone, if you are not within jurisdiction you can send someone, and if you are within jurisdiction make sure you go yourself. You can also conduct what? A physical inspection of that property. Visit that property. I repeat, visit the property to ensure that all the conditions are in place. And beyond assessing dis condition, you also can make inquiries from the neighbours, like maybe neighbours or local community members. Some of dis pipu will have knowledge about the property sometimes which you don't even know of initially. They can sometimes reveal if there are maybe boundary disputes or multiple claimants. They be like, dat property, don't buy it oo, top people are claiming that property. Oh, baba lagbaja, iya lagbaja, and the likes. They have been fighting over that property. Who wants to sell it to you? Some of all those neighbors in the local community or wherever will disclose to you if there are any disputes on that property. And also in rural or customary land settings, you can meet with the community leaders or the traditional family owners to confirm the land history and that the seller has the authority to sell. So another thing you need to take note of is survey and boundaries. So you need to obtain a survey plan from a licensed surveyor. Don't say that you don't have no money or something. You need a surveyor, right, who is going to verify the land boundaries. So compare the survey plan with the site to ensure the boundaries match with what is being claimed. Check with the surveyor general office that the land is not within any government acquired area or under reservation, because many disputes arise because people unknowingly buy land within government acquisition zones. So you might be unaware of this, and those selling it sometimes they might know, but then they won't disclose it to you. So a survey can also help detect any encroachment on that particular property. Then another furthermore, you also need to verify land use and zoning. Ensure that the land designated suit your purpose. For instance, if you in ten d to build a commercial facility, confirm that the land is not restricted to residential use only, because when you use the land contrary to its zoned purpose, it can lead to denial of building permit or even revocation of title in extreme cases. So that's why you need to check with the cities or urban planning office if needed to see the zoning for that area. Then you also need to execute a proper contract of sale, right? Although it is not mandatory, but then it is advisable that at the initial stage of the contract, you start with a contract of sale document. This contract of sale document, you know, outlines the terms and timelines of the transaction. So the contract prepared is usually prepared by lawyers, and will condition the final purchase on things like obtaining consent and paying the full price. So but then a contract of sale doesn't mean that the seller has actually transferred title to the buyer. It just gives an equitable interest to the buyer. Is now after the contract of sale has been completed, then you can now execute a deed of assignment at the final stage. That deed of assignment is that document that transfers the legal title. So you also need to ensure that this deed of assignment is drafted by a professional, majorly a lawyer, which is what which and it's going to and ensure that the deed of assignment clearly identifies the property, the parties, the purchase price, and it also recites the requirement of obtaining government consent. Then yes, so like I said earlier, after that has been done, you make sure that you do the CSR, the consent stamping and registration to perfect your title. So now, and we might also want to know of the regulatory bodies that and enforcement mechanisms that oversee real estate law compliance and properties in Nigeria. We have the State Ministries of Lands, also known as the Land Bureau, in each state. So the government typically acts through a commissioner, that is the Minister of Lands, and the Land Bureau or Land Department. So this body is responsible for land allocations, for granting certificate of occupancy, processing governors' consent, and maintaining land records. For example, now in Lagos, the Land Bureau and the Land Registry handle the issuance of electronic certificate of occupancy and the registration of title. So they enforce compliance by vetting every land transaction. Another body is the Land Use and Allocation Committee, which is established by the Land Use Act in each state. And this committee, what they do is to advise the governor on matters relating to land management, such as resettling of persons affected by expropriation and dispute resolution for claims on the land. We also have the state urban and physical planning authorities. We have the real estate regulatory authorities. And this real estate regulatory authorities is specific to some states, and in response to rampant fraud and unprofessional conduct in real estate sector, some states are now introducing dedicated regulators. For Lagos State now is a prime example. We have the Real Estate Regulatory Authority. And it's established under the Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Law 2002, 2022. And what their role is towards register and license real estate practitioners, agent developers in Lagos, and to act on consumer complaints. So we also have the law enforcement agencies, the police, the EFCC. So when it comes to fraudulent practices like selling someone's land with fake documents, swindling multiple prospective tenants, all these are criminal offences, and typically obtaining by false pretense or land related fraud. So the Nigerian police force handle such criminal complaints as well. We also have the judiciary, popularly known as the courts, right? So ultimately, the courts are a key enforcement mechanism for property rights. So if somebody encroaches on your land or violates your rights, the court's injunction or judgment is what enforces those rights. So what the judiciary do is to interpret the law. For instance, if there is a dispute on compensation for compulsory acquisition, the governor has actually acquired your property under compulsory acquisition, the court can actually enforce what is called adequate compensation, right? Although the court is not a regulatory body, but then the court system is central to upholding property laws when voluntary compliance fails. And we also have administrative tribunals in some states. We have the federal agencies for federal land. If you are dealing with federal government land, for instance in Abuja, or land belonging to the federal agencies, we have bodies like the Federal Capital Development Authority, that is the FCDA, and we also have the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing. They might be involved. So for instance, the FCDA and the Abuja Geographic Information System regulates titles in FCT. So they enforce it by deciding on allocations and ensuring that development meets the Abuja master plan. That is for Abuja. So in practice, all I'm saying is that staying compliant means engaging appropriately with these bodies. So you need to file your document at the land registry, get your necessary building approvals, pay your taxes, and verify the credentials of any agent or developer that you deal with. So I also like to talk on the common legal pitfalls in real estate. So most people face challenges due to oversight or misinformation, and some of the pitfalls include: number one, buying land from unauthorized seller, that is all these omonile people. These are one of the ways that people face challenges. Another instance is purchasing government acquired land without proper approvals, ignoring estate regulations, failing to register your transactions with the appropriate authorities. Avoiding these mistakes can actually what um avoiding these mistakes require proper legal guidance and due diligence. So in order to avoid all the mistakes I've highlighted earlier on, you need to what follow the due procedure by registering your land at the land registry and following all compliance procedures like I've said earlier. For instance, perfecting your title as well. So so for the best practices in order to secure like a profitable real estate, right? Like I said earlier, you need to engage professionals. Always work with certified real estate lawyers, surveyors and agents. Always make sure that you verify documents. Confirm all property documents before making payments. You also need to what? Ensure compliance with land use regulations to avoid demolitions or fines. And you also need to what? Invest in secured loans. That is, if when you want to buy property, you need to opt for legally recognized estates and areas with clear title histories. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, Ife, she's still here. So I'm coming to the end of the session. So in conclusion, right, what I'll say is that navigating Nigeria's real estate laws might actually seem complex, but then with the right knowledge and legal due diligence, you can make secured and profitable investments. Always remember to verify property titles, engage professionals, stay informed about regulatory changes, and I hope that this discussion has provided valuable insights into making legally sound real estate investments in Nigeria. Thank you. So I'll be handing over to Ife now.
Hello. Okay. Are you done, Miss Zainab?
Yes, yes, I'm done.
Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture. It's really amazing. In fact, you explained it, like you explained every bit of it. So someone asked a question, said, "Will the compensation be up to the true value of the property?" I can't hear you. Like you meet your
Okay, yeah, thank you. So that depends on the decision of the court, really. But
okay.
yeah, but in reality, it's meant to be up to the true value of the property, but everything is still what subject to the decision of the court. But at least adequate compensation, something that is still reasonable, will be paid to the person.
All right. So my question here, you mentioned deed of assignment. Is deed of assignment the same thing as deed of transfer? Or mute your mic.
Yeah, so the deed of assignment is just like a document that evidences a transfer of title. Maybe some
And
people call it deed
deed
of
of
transfer.
transfer.
But
Okay.
the
Now,
proper name is the deed of assignment.
okay. So the government concept, is the two, like government concept and deed of assignment, the two is important or one of them?
The two is actually important. Like I said, after you have gotten your deed of assignment is just a document executed by the buyer and the seller, right?
I
So after that has been concluded, the transaction doesn't end there. The next thing you need to do is to what? Perfect your title. And you perfect
like
your title by what? Securing governor's consent. So
concept.
yeah, the two is needed.
Okay, okay. So most of the explanation you made, most of our real estate companies, like registered real estate companies, have already done most of these things for clients, right? So but I think clients will have to do another due diligence to know if the real estate company has actually done what they need to do, right?
Yes, they have to. I said that while I was presenting, that on the part of the buyer, don't just say that okay, because you have already consulted a real estate agent now, you will not do your own personal research on that property. And I mentioned that even the client has to engage his own personal lawyer. The fact that you have a real estate agent does not mean that you should not secure a lawyer as well that is a real estate lawyer. And I also mentioned the fact the one of the things that lawyer will do is to was conduct due diligence by going to the land registry to confirm the seller's title. And I also mentioned that even the client himself can visit the property himself to confirm that okay, all the details they are telling me are correct.
are correct. Okay. Thank you so much for the class. I don't know, those that are online, please, do you have any questions? If you have, please drop your question in the comment section. Please drop your question. So we need to follow due. That word due diligence is very important when you are getting a property here in Nigeria. You need to follow due diligence, then follow the procedure. Then you mentioned this CSR. CSR. Can you please
Yeah.
explain that CSR again?
Okay, I said CSR means consent, stamping, and registration, right? So it means it's just a process of perfecting your title. The first thing to do is to what? Obtain governor's consent. That is known as C, right? And this is what's required by the Land Use Act. So the holder of a statutory right of occupancy must seek governor's consent before transferring that right to the buyer. So the
Yeah.
fact that you have a statutory right of occupancy does not mean that you can just sell your property or sell your land just like that. You need what? To seek governor's consent before you transfer, whether it's a mortgage, even whether it's a mortgage, whether it's a lease on, or
Yes.
maybe the deed of assignment that was executed. You need to what? Seek governor's consent. And secondly, I said you also need to what? Pay stamp duty. This is usually done at at the tax authority. They are going to assess the property and determine the stamp duty that will be paid. Then lastly is the registration at the land registry. So if after they have obtained governor's consent, you've stamped your deed of assignment or whatever legal documents that evidences governor's consent. Then you now go to the land registry. That is, the land registry has to be the land registry at the which is within the location of the property. So you can't buy a property in Lagos and go to Abuja to say that you want to register your instruments, right? So it
Okay.
has to be done at the land registry where your property is
Okay. The
situated.
process. Okay. The process is the CXR. The process you just
Yes.
explained is a process. Okay. Now I understand. Thank you so much for the class. I think there's no question. Nobody drop question here. So thank you for having us, and thank you for the excellent lecture. It's really so, guys. I hope we all learned a lot because I personally learned a lot in this lecture. I hope you learned too. I'm having trouble with my network. Thank you guys for joining the live session, and those that are still coming in, you can drop your comments in the on the comment section. Still drop your comments, we'll check it out and we'll answer your comments. So see you guys in our next session next month, and do have a lovely night. Bye. Bye, Miss Zainab.
Yeah, bye. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye everyone.
Thank you so much.